Welcome to the Tao of Pizza, where we feature top logistics leaders, entrepreneurs, and supply chain innovators and share their inspiring stories with a holistic twist.
Mark Hiddleson here, host of the Tao of Pizza podcast, where I talk with top industry innovators in the warehousing, logistics, and supply chain business with a holistic twist. Now, before I introduce today's guest, Rob Zwolinski, this episode is brought to you by Specialized Storage Solutions, Inc. Now, listen, I've been in the logistics and storage industry for several decades, and I didn't think I looked that old, but now people are telling me I do. But anyways, we provide industry-leading warehouse storage solutions nationwide. So basically, if you have a warehouse and needs rack, shelving, carts, conveyors, or mezzanines, we help with the design, engineering, installations, inspections, and repairs to help clients optimize their logistics operations. And Rob, it's funny, sometimes people don't even realize that we sell hand trucks, pallet jacks, and rolling stairs. But what we do is we take a holistic look at your entire business supply chain to develop the resources for continuing improving your operation. To learn more, visit specialracks.com. Give us a call at 707-732-3892. And I even give my personal email address for podcast listeners. So email me at markhiddleson@aol.com if you're ready to take your warehouse storage and retrieval systems to the next level. Now, before I get started, one of the things that gives the podcast a holistic twist is a range of guests that we host. We've hosted some of our best strategic partners like Nancy and Sal Fatine from our engineering group, great clients like Chris Murphy, Michael Thomas, and Joe Ferris from the logistics and grocery and supply chain industry. And then the last few episodes have been with professionals in the personal and professional development field, which is one of my passions. Longtime colleagues like Vicky Dellojoyo and John Allen Mollenhauer, and then some new friends and colleagues like Leanne Monahan and Bonnie Artman Fox. Be sure to check out those episodes if you're interested. They all have a unique brand of brilliance in their field. But today we're joined by Rob Zwolinski. Rob is an executive in the pharmaceutical and medical device industry with 30 years of experience, which spans founding a company to working for established commercial companies. Rob has an MBA in entrepreneurship from Wharton Business School. And what makes Rob a very special guest and completes the holistic twist of Tao Pizza is that Rob is one of my favorite and most experienced drinking buddies. Rob, welcome to the Tao Pizza.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mark. Thanks for the intro. And unfortunately, since I moved across the country, the drinking part of it together has been a little curtailed. But hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yeah, I think you're coming out here. It's Friday, so I think are you coming out in May?
No, we're actually coming out the week before graduation for our girls. So I'm not sure when you're heading up to Corvallis, but we'll be heading up to Eugene. I guess it's Father's Day weekend.
Yeah, that's it is. It's dads and grads.
Yeah.
One of my best friends, he always complains like, mothers get their own special day, and that's coming up right in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And moms are special. Shout out to all the moms. But my buddy Danny goes, it's always moms get their own day, but with dads, it's always dads and grads.
Yeah, because so is Serena's graduation on Sunday?
It's Saturday the 16th.
16th, okay, because Father's Day is the 17th.
Yeah. So the whole weekend's going to be dads and grads, but we'll have to connect. So that's how we connected. Was our kids were in kindergarten together. I think my oldest kids are like 30 now, 29. How old is Sean? He's
29. Yeah,
Cody is. How old is Cody?
I guess I take it back. He's
28, I think.
28. You're right. I think Sean's 28 too. I'm just thinking what year it is. So that's right.
But by June, he'll be 29. By then, what we're talking about.
Right. Well, his birthday's in a couple of weeks. So, So, is part of the show prep, it was what do we talk about? And I was thinking it's just with, Serena graduating from Oregon State and Annika graduating from University of Oregon. And the connection that we have with our kids, it's interesting. We've got, our two oldest are the same age, went to school together. Our middle girls, that we've got are the same age. And Serena babysat for our youngest. So we both got, and then you've got your youngest is a boy as well. So it's like we've got a lot of things, in common, and that's kind of how we connected. So I just thought it'd be an interesting time to talk about just some of the life lessons. We've got the older ones and we've got girls that are graduating and things that we've gone through in our lives that kind of have shaped who we are. And, maybe some advice from the old men for for our kids. Whether or not they want to listen to it is secondary, but we've both taken kind of an interesting path to get to where we are, and I think there's some lessons in there.
It has, and you've been, since we met, when we had a friendship, it was almost instantaneously. We always used to. I don't know if you remember this, but I'm pretty sure one of the first, like we had met, we complain about the music program, like they got to do more current stuff with the music, just kind of co-commiserating after the. I love those. It's funny, those Christmas programs. I miss them, and it didn't matter if it was Roma or in the later years they got some newer stuff. But we always hosted a pumpkin carving party when the kids were young, like starting when Sean and Cody were young, and after there was always the beginning party was for the kids, and then the after party was for the adults. And I remember we were drinking wine in the hot tub with glasses, which I know is like super great advice for our kids. But you went to like flick out the extra wine out because you didn't want to mix the wine, and the top of the glass just magically snapped off and shot like a fireball through the crowd. And we were both like, oh, that was awesome.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And so the other thing you forgot to share that we have in common, we both have long relationships. Casey and I have been married. It'll be 25 years in June. And what wasn't funny, our wives didn't think it was as funny as we did.
I think that's probably a theme for the last 25 years. It's never as funny as we think it is.
But it was like an instant connection. And one of the things, we worked out, there was a period there, some of the toughest periods in my life, like when my grandmother passed away, which, emotionally probably the toughest. So everything's going great, business is great, kids are doing awesome, and we had this family blowout. And I remember a part of my routine was a strength train. And we strength trained a lot together, but it was more than that. We were always comparing notes on business. What was it, like a 3 or 4 year period, right? You were going to work.
It was quite a while. Yeah, we had the basement there on 2nd Street. Or is it 2nd, right?
Well, I don't want anyone to know. It's kind of
whatever.
My office is in an underground bunker hidden beneath the surface. But yeah, it's 4th Street in Napa. Yeah.
No, I remember that. And it was great. It was just time to kind of connect and there were some days where it was workout, and then the afternoon was go out to lunch and then come home about 9 p.m.
Yeah. lunch from 2 to 9. Yeah, we had a few it was mostly, I will say, it was mostly working out, business. We just bounced a lot of ideas through each other, what we were going through. We did take different paths. So share a little bit. We'll go back to, there's some family stuff we can go back to, but how did you get from this is one of the conversations I love.
It's just so interesting. I'll start beginning career wise. When I graduated from University of Illinois, and I was actually an assistant manager at an Aldi grocery store when I graduated, and was making good money at the time. I remember it was just, this is 1993 money, and so I was making about 50 grand a year, and I was that was good money at the time, and but soon realized that the grocery store, the advancement potential and growth potential really wasn't there. And I had a science degree, so what was I doing at the grocery store? I took a 50% pay cut when I was 22 years old to go work in my first job in the pharmaceutical industry, and people thought I was absolutely nuts. But it was kind of the first point in my life that I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a bet on myself. I'm going to bet that this is the right thing and that it will pay off in the end. And it obviously did. That was taking what was a big step backwards to realign my trajectory and really put me on a path to a much greater success.
Yeah.
And I try to tell that to people, especially when they're young, that they shouldn't be afraid to take a step back or take a step to the side if they're betting on themselves. Because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to. So just do it. And it worked for me.
That's awesome. Well, it's funny because I tell a story when people ask me how I got into this business. I chose the business that I got into, material handling, because I'd spent months at the career center. And back then at Sac State, it was a bunch of 3-ring binders. You could look at, this was, engineering. This was, and I started to look, well, first I started to look at sales because I had experience in that. But then even in the sales, I was like, okay, which pays the most? But what is left out of the story is sometimes no matter what, I took like a 50% pay cut because I had been in the car business for 5 years. So I was an assistant sales manager, and kind of even what I was making, the very next step in graduating from college, I was going to be making 50% more. But I looked at that industry and it's got some dead ends that are worse than grocery because a lot of the guys that I worked with back then are either strung out on drugs or dead or in jail. It was just a different lifestyle, and I really wanted a family. And I could, I know I've got friends in the car business that are family guys, and they're good guys, and they're still, some of my best friends are in that industry. But the percentages was like 99 to 1. So I took a pay cut too. And so really, money's important. I won't deny that. And that was one of the things. But I love that you said that because you took a pay cut, you took a bet on yourself, and you've taken some other bets on yourself since then too. So there's another conversation. We had some great conversations, but one time you were telling me, you're like, yeah, I go, you're traveling a lot. You're away from your family. Like that has to be a huge cost of your energy and everything. And you're like, yeah, but I see, you're making sacrifices when you give up something in the short term to get it in the long term. And you're like, man, I just see like things the way it could be so much better. And like we just worked out at my gym, we walked across the street and we're drinking Chardonnay and Cabernet in Napa Valley. I'm like, yeah, because this really sucks. So share a little bit about your mindset on that because you had a vision that was just share like what that was like.
Yeah. So, that was one of the things. I mean, I've spent a lot of years traveling, where from, not like some people travel 75% of the time and they see their family 1 week a month. Mine was kind of the other way around. I'd maybe travel a week a month. But it was one of those things where, you learn so much, especially I was doing a lot of international traveling. So it was kind of what you learn and what you can absorb from different people, different cultures, different environments, and how you can bring that back to do things better. And what really interesting to me is, especially traveling to Europe, is the folks in Europe have let me leave the UK out of it because they're very much like the US, where it's a grind and they try to do a lot, work a lot, get a lot done. But the rest of Europe has a much different mentality about taking time off, taking vacations, spending time with their family, holidays in Europe, especially Christmas, Easter, kind of the big religious holidays are such a different experience over there, where it's not commercial. It is just about family. And to me, it was interesting because it just was a bit of a reset for me. Because you know what it's like, as you get more success and you have more money, things become a bit more materialistic, and you can go down this path.
Yeah.
And going over there and seeing that you don't have to do that stuff to be happy. It was huge. And it really kind of changed my perspective on what I'm doing, especially when I'm at home, appreciating what I've got at home. And you mentioned the relationship duration. I mean, Joy and I have been together for 27 years, 28 years, and been married for 23. So it's been a lot of just family time. And just a little diversion on that. Joy and I have this conversation a lot, where a lot of people talk about how much work a marriage is, how much work a relationship is. What's interesting for Joy and I are like, do you think this is work? And both of us are like, no, this is easy. And so I know we're probably the exception, and which is great for us. But our relationship is easy, not because we've had things easy. It's just that we, I get along. And again, just another little anecdote. I knew that Joy was the one that I could spend a long time with. It was shortly after we started dating, and I needed to change the alternator in my car. And it was a pain in the ass, getting getting the belts right, getting everything tight.
Yeah.
and, and she's out there helping me. And we got it done without just screaming at each other and needing to take a break away from each other. And again, it wasn't because everything went right. It was just because we communicated properly, and it was easy for her to communicate, or for the two of us to communicate. So it was just, that was like one of those early relationship things that was like, oh, this is great. It was like something as silly as changing an alternator in a car just light bulb went off. It's like, this is the one.
Yeah. Yeah. We call those opportunities now. So we know our wives really well. And it's like, as a matter of fact, I know I'm one of your wife's favorite people. Because then the reason I know that is I've never been in any more knockdown, drag out fights with another person's wife. So, geez, you got her fighting with me instead of fighting with you. But I love Joy. I mean, she's brilliant. She's a molecular biologist, or what I always make
microbiology.
Microbiologist. I always call it the wrong thing, and she'll tell me. Very smart. And we have, those are opportunities, like docking a boat or trying to hook up a trailer, when the stakes are like high, right? It's 4th and 2. I call it 4th and 2. I have a tendency to look at every down like 4th and 2. But the thing about a marriage, like the thing that's made it easier, one is like we're committed. There's no doubt in that. But I've found it's funny. Anything I have that could be a complaint about Casey, we've been married 25 years. It's always when it comes down to it, it's a reflection of me. I'm like, if I was just the other day, she asked me to take something upstairs, and I said, "Where do you want it?" Because I knew wherever I put it, she was going to want it somewhere else. And so she goes, I don't want to answer a bunch of questions. Just take it anywhere up here. So I went up there. I set it down. And as soon as I set it down, she goes, I don't want that there. Move it over there. I was like, I just asked you that.
Yeah, you knew it
But
was coming.
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. I should have just went up there, put it down, waited for her to move. Like, you know what I mean? The fact that there was any resistance, I was just laughing. It's like, just
Yeah.
go. So that is awesome. So the early days, a lot of traveling. I mean, the culture thing, yeah, with when you bring up holiday, I'll never forget the first time we traveled to Europe, and that was one of my passions too, is that I wanted to travel. I wanted to see other cultures because you start to make his assumptions. We live here, we think everybody lives like this, and you're
Right.
right, the pace totally different. There's a quality of life that's hard to put to words. But one thing, Casey and I, we met a couple. I think they're from Austria, one of the like Eastern Bloc European countries, and it was the first time we heard they get 4 or 5 weeks. They call it holiday. They have 4 or 5 weeks of
Yeah.
holiday, like no matter what. That's
Yeah.
starting. Like in the US, you start with like zero, and then after 2 years, you get like one day. I mean, it's not that bad, but it's like 1 week, right? Or 2 weeks. And I was
Yeah,
immediately, I had
well,
2 weeks vacation at that time. I went back, I told my boss, I'm like, I need 5 weeks.
yeah. Well, and the other people the thing is that from a culture standpoint and from a business standpoint, those holiday times are respected by the people that they work with and the companies that they work with. There isn't a an expectation that they're working holidays. They're off. They're recharging. They're as far as anybody's concerned, they're disconnected from any communication. So um, it's a little different in that regard as well because it's respected that time off is time off. Um, so and not that I don't complain about it on my side with our European business partners that they have all this vacation and because it slows us down, but it's some of that's just out of sheer jealousy. So
Yeah. Yeah. Because you look at it for sure. So talk a little bit. You've been involved with what I call supply chains. When I got in this business, I really didn't know what the supply chain was. I kind of knew that products moved from manufacturers to
yeah,
distributors to wholesalers that ended up in a store. But there's a whole different area of in supply chain. Everyone, like my kids, like now people, anything that goes wrong, my kids will just look and go, well, like Drake goes, it's supply chain, Dad, supply chain. Like,
yeah,
like you say, it's the answer.
right.
It's become something nobody heard of to now Drake and Cody are just well, supply chain.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't have to have any other
it's
expectation,
everything.
but you've developed
Yeah.
products with multiple partners,
Yes.
multiple countries working on different. I always thought it was cool talking with the projects you're working on because bringing so many different parts together. So talk about kind of how that works, like what makes
Yeah.
things go back. Like how can you do that? Develop a product with multiple countries, multiple companies, multiple control points, and
Yeah.
multiple
So
opportunities for things to go wrong.
yeah. So one of the things that I've kind of become specialized in is an outsourced manufacturing model. So I most of the products that I've worked on are manufactured somewhere else outside the company. We didn't build manufacturing capacity within our organization. We relied on experts in the field to do that for us. So, in the medical device arena, we've what we ended up doing is one of the projects was completely outsourced. So we had an engineering firm that was doing design work in the UK. So they were designing the product for us. And within that, we had a specialized battery that was manufactured in the U.S. at a company in Missouri, and we had a printed circuit board that was fabricated in Switzerland, and we had other parts from Belgium and from France, and manufacturing and assembly injection molding and assembly in Wisconsin. So, needless to say, things needed the way that I've seen this described probably is that it's a symphony. It needs to be managed like a symphony, not like a jazz band. So, so a symphony, everything is working very harmoniously together, and you need to have all of the touch points very clean and clear. And you throw some of the all of the customs issues on top of it, and so things need to be very harmonious in the way that they're managed. Whereas a jazz band, everybody's kind of doing their own thing, making the music that they want to make, and it can be, people might like that because of whatever, but it doesn't have that same smoothness and the same harmonious nature that a symphony does. So,
Because in jazz, you can improvise.
right, there's no improvising. Everybody's
We
got to be on the same page.
we
That's that's
just went.
that's exactly it.
I remember I was thinking about you too because we went to a concert at Uptown yesterday, and remember when we went to Todd Rundgren, and I was telling you there was that song "Hello, It's Me," Todd Rundgren. I'm like, this song. I'm like, there's another song too, and you're like, it doesn't matter because it sounds exactly the same as that. Well, we went to a show and we didn't know what it was. We were just kind of, the kids have moved out, and every time I walked by Uptown Theater to go to the bank, and I saw, it was a guy that looked like jazz. I'd never heard of him, but we went and it was jazz. It was awesome. But there's a different in symphony. You don't improvise, right?
Right.
There's
Well,
somebody going like this, and then if you don't, they'll throw the stick at you, right?
right. If somebody is a little bit off key or off tune or off pace in a symphony,
Yeah.
and so that was one of the things that it really needed to learn and focus on was all of the touch points and making sure that everybody was working together and communicating, because one of the big issues that dealt with throughout my career is communication.
Yeah.
How people communicate, what they communicate, how communication is perceived. Because and that's a huge there's a huge difference in culture, how communication is perceived. And so you end up needing to be a bit of an expert in psychology and an expert in just the technical understanding of what's going on, and making sure that you understand which people in which company you're dealing with. And so it was really, it's been interesting, and it's really made me, I think, a lot better communicator, because regardless of who you're communicating to, it's use the fewest amount of words that you can, get to the point, and make sure that if you've got a point, you get to it quick. If you got a question, ask it quick. And there's, if people want more information, they'll ask. And I try to get that across to people, and that way there's fewer opportunities for misunderstandings, there's fewer opportunities for mistakes, there's fewer opportunities for hurt feelings.
Yeah.
So
Because a lot of times if you say too much, the story gets involved. But it's like I'm the same way, and so there's the trust that somebody's going to ask a question if they don't get it right. One of my
yeah,
that I write, and I'm writing a book. One of the things I practice with is archetypes, and like the Don Juan archetype or the clown archetype, or different. But I remember taking a class in my master's degree, and it was the archetypes of healing, and it was like a weekend. It was more of like a retreat than a class. It's like group. A lot of classes are group therapy because, like you said, I mean, it is in communicating. There's people look at things different way. All these different people from different cultures. But it was Saturday morning at 9 or 10 o'clock, and I still didn't know what he meant by archetype. And then it was like, I'm raising my hand like this because I'm like, if I go any further, I'm going to miss the whole class. But I've waited too long. I should have asked this at 6 o'clock Friday night, not 10 o'clock Saturday morning. But I run into that is that, especially, and it's interesting that the more talented people I know or the more knowledgeable, they won't ask a question. And then a week happens and go, hey, you were going to take care of this. And I was like, well, I didn't know what you mean when you gave me that. I didn't get it. It was like, well, you should have asked me right there. It's like, you didn't give me enough information. I was like, I thought I did.
Right.
unless,
Yeah.
unless you tell me I didn't, I'm thinking everything's hunky dory. Right. So you got to stop. Wait a
Absolutely.
minute. I don't get it. I don't know what an archetype is. Okay. So I know it's day two. I know there's no stupid question, but this is probably one of them. Right. It,
Oh yeah.
the more
Yeah.
type A people are, I think the less they won't ask the question, which is key, right? Be vulnerable,
Yeah.
be humble.
And that's one of the things I've started doing more of is I ask questions. I ask a lot more questions. And especially when I want when I want somebody to do something, I will ask them to explain to me what they're going to do. You know, and it's like, okay, this is what we want to do. What do you think? Tell me how you get this done. Um, just so that there's clarity. And if you get a blank stare and silence, you know that, okay, let's talk about this. and so I've also found that you can say, you know, in your example, well, I told this person what to do and didn't hear back, and you assume that, okay, it's all getting done, and that's where it's like the follow up, the let me know if you have any questions. The phone call as opposed to an email. I hate email, by the way. I'd much rather have a 5-minute phone call than 10 emails back and forth, getting stuff across. But I just think that those are the points of communication that I find. And if we want to bring this back to kind of family stuff, it works with relationships as well, is making sure that your point got across in the way it was intended, not the way it was perceived. Because it's like, well, you were coming at me about this. No, I wasn't. I asked you a question.
I just was curious to know the answer.
Yeah. So it's, and I guess I've calmed down, matured, whatever, over the years, whatever you want to call it. Just lost a little bit of, my, I don't want to say I lost an edge, but I've kind of, the peaks aren't quite as high with the emotion anymore. So
Yeah.
just it it really all comes down to communication for me. And like I said, from the supply chain side, that was where I saw things fall apart, was communication. And in the manufacturing was communication. So it was something that I spent a lot of time doing.
Yeah, it is. And I love what you said about uh so you ask, it's almost like a role play, which I don't do enough of, where you ask somebody and you say, okay, how are you going to handle this? And then you listen to their whole approach and you can look for the holes in it. And they don't, like, it might take them a week to do that, but they can kind of give you a step by step. I'm going to call this, I'm going to call this, I'm going to follow up. If they don't get back to me, I'm going to have, and you can look for the holes in their plan.
Yeah.
Right. And then if there aren't any hole, or I didn't think about that, or have you thought about this? Uh, what are, what are some,
Let me just one other thing on that is, the other thing is, there are times where I learn of a different way.
yeah,
So by doing that, it's like, because I don't necessarily need people to do things the way I do them.
obviously, I don't want
And
people doing this stuff the way I take all kinds of shortcuts, and I've been doing this for 30 years. If you do it the way
yeah,
I do, you're gonna mess it up.
right. And so there are times where through that process, there's learning as well as teaching opportunities there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So that's why I was thinking. So it's actually, for me, I look at it as a strength as a leader to say, look, I don't want to tell you the methods. I just want to give you the job I want done.
yeah,
And it's I probably first heard from Stephen Covey, 20 years ago, don't teach methods, it's principles, as long as we're all on the same page. And like you said, the always willing to ask if you're stuck, like you're not going to be embarrassed to be
right.
stuck. And that's one of the things when I raised my hand, that group of people that I was in, it was a it was a trust tree. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like nobody was going to judge me for asking a stupid question. That's kind of a culture thing, right? And it was like, I
yeah.
go, what do you mean, you moron? I don't know what an archetype is. I think a lot of people were looking around going, I'm glad he asked that question because
Yeah, I
I
was,
don't.
yeah, right. There are times you're not the only one with that question.
Yeah, exactly. It's like an archetype is a universal symbol that we've had from hundreds of years that shows up in acting and movies and everything. We all play a role. It's like, oh, I was supposed to know that going out of the gate, right?
Yeah, just it was innate knowledge.
Right. But so there's that safety net of though, like you can ask any question, but yeah, I like letting somebody else do it because you learn. And I'm always looking for, that's one of my growth always. I'm always surprised. It's one of the things that's made me effective over the years. I've learned from so many different people, ways to do things. That's one thing I realized, probably 6 or 7 years ago, is I look at the mentors I've had
Yeah,
taking me under their wing when I didn't even deserve it or whatever. They needed somebody and they're looking at me going, this guy can probably do it. Uh, who were some of your mentors? Either from school, Wharton, or your
yeah.
career?
So I think one of the first ones I was when I was working at this company called Aerodyne. I had been there for a number of years, and we got some management turnover at the time. So this his name's Baba Venkatadri. He was really the first one that I, I don't know how I shouldn't say he's the first one. He's one of them that's probably the most memorable. He used to bring me in his office quite a bit and have me work on presentations for board presentations or management presentations with him. And at the time it was like, why is this guy doing this? Doesn't he know how to use PowerPoint? You know, so, but as I was doing these tasks with him, is almost a bit of Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off kind of moves, where it was, well, I'm going to have you just kind of do these somewhat, you know, menial or inane tasks, but there's meaning to them, and by working on these presentations with him, I actually really got to where it's like, all right, this is what, when you're doing executive communication, what executive communication means and how you do it, and what sort of information is important and how it's presented is important, and making sure that you have answers, and all of those sorts of things that were kind of behind what he was doing, but not necessarily part of me typing his presentations for him. And so and then he provided me all kinds of opportunities, and has been, I keep it, this was 2004, 2005, so he's somebody I still keep in contact with. He's a great guy, and it wasn't until after some of this happened that I realized, like, you know what, he really helped me. And there's been a few others, but he's the one that really stands out, for me from a work standpoint. It was great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Baba Venkatadri.
Baba
Baba.
Venkatadri. I'm gonna put that in the show notes if you'll allow me that, but I'm gonna need you to text me how to
Yeah.
spell
Yeah.
because that's a great.
And Mark, I will tell you, it's spelled just like it sounds.
Okay. Okay, then never mind. Wait, I have a question, right? See, I need to find out. You text me the spelling of that in all caps.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great
No, he,
story.
like I said, he was a great guy.
And I love that. And it's the time. So there's a debate. Like I've been a work from home guy since 1997, right? And so
Yeah,
like all now is like a new work from home. And there's many people would ask me back then, well, how do you draw the line where you're not just, doing your laundry or doing the dishes? And I go, you know what, with me, it's the other way around. I have to draw the line of where I'll stop working because I'm passionate. I want to be successful. I want to,
yeah,
I love what I'm doing. I have to do, Frank, here's a line. I only had work, home office uh for 5 years, but as soon as I started my own company, I needed my wife's like, you need a separate office. Because I'd be in there
yeah.
when we first started the company, like that first year, I would work till midnight. It didn't matter. It's like this is a new
Oh yeah.
company. I have to get off the line. I got 3 small mouths to feed. What did I do? I had an awesome job. I was making great money. I had an assistant. I had somebody to type my presentation. Now I'm typing the presentation. Uh, so the thing for me is cutting it off the other way. Not just
Yeah,
working 100% of the time, but the screen. And this is great. I love that we're able to. But what you described with Baba, it being together and just it's the nuances, right? Of being in
yeah,
person. There is a real. It doesn't have to be all the time. Like we don't have to be sitting around the cooler
yeah.
every day, but those important times that it's face to face, right?
Yeah, well, and you were working from home, but you had job sites to go to,
Oh,
you had
totally. Yeah.
customers to visit, that sort of thing. So, it's not like you're sitting cold calling people in your office 12 hours a day. You got to go. That human interaction is absolutely important, and just along those lines. So, I've been working from home a day or two a week for several years, and I find that actually helpful because there are certain things where I just need to focus to get done, and you just don't have that focus in an office setting. And quite honestly, I think especially coming out of COVID, where we were working from home predominantly for 3 years, 2.5 years, whatever it was. Um, People thought we were doing great. you know we're thriving working in this remote environment, and we can get this done. When we got back in the office, my opinion is we were surviving, and as more interactions started happening again in the office in person, and the interactions were just more frequent, we realized what we were missing, because I think everybody was just trying to get by, for the times when we were at home, and it's the personal interconnections, stopping by and talking to somebody in person. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And again, it helps the communication, and to me, I'm a true believer in communication is the key to everything we do. And if you can't communicate clearly, you can't communicate concisely, you're going to be at a disadvantage. Because I've got great people who work for me that just can't communicate as effectively as others, and it hurts them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
know?
it's listening more than it is speaking, really. It
Yeah,
is like 2 ears in one mouth because
yeah,
and if you make up and a lot of people start making up the answer in their head before they even hear the whole question, which a lot of times I'll ask. And that's why my wife doesn't want me to ask any more questions, because I'll ask a bunch of clarifying questions like, well, you wanted it upstairs. Well, what you said underneath the air hockey table? Did you want it on the left side or the right? That's what she's like, just shut up and do it. But in business, it actually pays off to do that, right?
yeah.
It reminds me. So I was going to give you a hard time about saying you were a great friend and a crappy customer, but it's actually not true. I was thinking about it. I was like, well, wait a minute. We did some nice jobs, and
Yeah.
our company, that was early in our company. Uh, was it Laszlo Sander? Was he the contact lad
Yeah, that's right. That was at Aerodyne.
at
Uh,
Aerodyne? And that was one. We have a minimum charge. It's like, and I keep raising it. It was like 1993 price, but it's like $1,500. Well, Aerodyne needed one section of racking, and he really wanted a discount. So I said, "Look, I can give you a discount, but I'm gonna have to combine it with another job. Like, if you have time, we'll do it for half price, but I got to combine it with something else." Well, that obviously it never happened after like 3 or 4 weeks, and he called me. He's like, "Hey, I realize I told you that, but I really need this." So I was like, "Okay, I'll do it myself." It's one section, right? It's one section, and I went there, and it was it was my grandfather had passed away. It was like a lot of different stuff going, but I could do it on my way. I rented the impact thing that you needed, and I went there with my sister. Like my sister and I installed this thing. It was one section. Well, it took us almost all day because it took a long time to figure out. Well, do you want it 6 inches off the wall? Do you want to scoot it over here? And everything. Well, that's every job, and a lot of people don't realize whether you're doing one section or 10 sections, it takes an hour to figure out where it's going.
right.
So, and the punchline of that is that because I was doing stuff with my grandfather's memorial and everything, I forgot to return the drill to the rental company. So they just kept charging me every day. Well, the drill rental cost me like $600. But the good news is, uh, that was probably 17 years ago. And I've probably only
Yeah.
installed rack myself like one other time.
But there you go. It was a lesson.
Yeah. But you have been a great client, and we don't do a lot in the in higher tech field. Ours is well, not everything's high tech now. I mean, we have a
Yeah.
client, I won't say who it is, but their system got hacked, and they're a major player. And so grocery stores aren't getting their stuff. Uh and it's all because their systems. I mean, they still have forklifts, they still have drivers, so they're having to go back and pick the paper. But I mean, we don't do a lot in medical device or pharmaceutical development. We can, we did. I
Yeah.
will say we did a great job for you guys. So, but before I wanted to say more. I wanted to say congratulations to our girls. I'm so proud of them, Annika and Serena. And I was thinking about it. That parallel, like they were like different dance studios. Like Serena was always into dance, but
Yeah.
Annika was into dance, and it was a different uh,
Yeah.
more competition. And Serena, and it's funny now, even Drake, his girlfriend is like, she's basically, her mom owns a dance studio. She's basically a professional dancer, So I was thinking, I always made fun of other guys like, "Oh, you're cheer dad or you're dance dad." Well, we both
Yeah.
that's one of the things I'm most proud of.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, because one of the things I think you probably know this. I set up for Annika's cheer team. I set up a nonprofit to help support her cheer team, and so that we could raise money and do stuff for cheer, and it was one of those things where I don't think she had any idea what went into that. That was a lot of work to manage and a lot of work to really just help her team. But it was all worth it because she was really enjoying herself, and I would do it anytime for any of the kids,
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter. And
yeah,
so that part of this, and just seeing, like I said, Serena and Annika graduating here in a couple weeks or a month or whatever it is, and just them moving on to whatever the next chapter of their life is going to be great to see. And you know, I do whatever whatever she needs help with. I mean, and she's very independent, very driven. So I know she's not going to ask for anything, But
it is. And
um,
I've had people say, "Wow, what a tough time to go to school." And it has been tough, but
yeah,
with Serena, she's made it into an opportunity. She's graduating on time. Oh, and another thing, so she's taking one of the so shout out to class of It's class of 2023, right? Oregon
Yeah.
State and Oregon. So now they're going to competing schools. It's about Serena. We went back there for something. We were there, and Oregon State was playing Oregon in basketball. And we were staying at the Marriott there, and we get in the elevator, and it's funny because it smelled a little bit like a skunk had been in the elevator. I don't know, it was
It's
us.
Oregon.
And we get in the elevator, and there's this tall guy, and I'm like, it's Bill Walton. And I'd run into one of the other broadcasters, and I was a little bit starstruck. I was with Serena and Casey, and I go, "Are you a famous basketball player?" And he just kind of smiled, and he looked at me, and Serena goes, "Dad." She looked at him, she goes, "I'm sorry." She goes, "You're tall." She goes, "You probably get that all the time." She's like, "Leave this guy alone." And she's like telling me, and I'm looking at him.
It's just a Hall of Fame basketball player. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and he was left-handed. When I was a kid, he was on the Trailblazers, and I didn't want to be that fan who just dumped.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, Bill Walton, I'm left-handed. You're left. Like we're basically brothers, right?" It's
Right.
and he goes, "I'm just happy to be here in Corvallis," but he was there for the game, and so I also anyone who hears this podcast, and if you can find me in Corvallis, I'll be there from like June 14th to 16th. I will buy you a drink. So all the Oregon State people listening to this, I know Serena's going to share it on her feed. I don't know who will get a hold of it. I want to see what kind of bill these guys can crack. So I will put that offer out there, podcast listeners. Some of them do. Serena had a roommate said one time, she's like, "I listened to this whole podcast. The guy didn't talk about pizza one time." So that's an offer. It's open to you. We should probably meet somewhere in between. They're only an hour
Yeah,
apart.
so we'll be in Napa June 10th. So
Okay.
depending on when you're heading up there, yeah, we're in Napa the whole week before graduation.
Okay, we'll connect. So the last question I want to ask you, and I've asked a few guests, is what is something that's like a new technology or an app or something that you're using, uh, or another podcast that you like listening to? That's the thing. You can't think of an app or anything. I'm not going to ask you your favorite podcast because I know it's this one. I mean, you like Adam Carolla. I know you.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is, I am very much an old school person. And I find it somewhat visceral and somewhat um, helpful to actually write, like longhand write stuff out, because it makes me think. And unfortunately, I think at times we rely on things to think for us and to really help us. And I find that I kind of lose some of the control or some of the understanding of what I'm doing on a daily basis. So I've actually taken a conscious step back to really kind of focus myself on old technology, on having things written down and just working with that mindset, because to me it engages my whole thought process. And so I know it might be a little different answer than you typically get, but I find it very meaningful, and it keeps me grounded.
I love it. I love it. That's a perfect way. So one of the interviews I did with Leanne Monahan, and I brought up with her a conversation you and I had uh, about journaling because we were having lunch, and I was
Yeah.
telling her, I was like, I really like journaling, but the last few weeks I haven't had time. And you're like, "Oh yeah," you're like, it's time, as everyone's out of time and everything like that. But you go, when you journal, how long do you usually do it? And like, "Oh, it's usually like 5 to 7 minutes." And then there's like, the words came out of my mouth. It's like I don't have 5 to 7 minutes to do one of the things that gives me the most. Uh, it's just hard to explain. Leanne went into like when you write, and I know this about us, like when you physically write something out. And that's what I've always written my calendars. Like I've set up a digital calendar for the podcast just for scheduling because there's pre-interview questions, all that stuff to automate made sense. But I really was resistant to automate that part because I draw my calendar. I start with a blank page and I like draw lines and like, here's my gratitude list over here. This is my to-do list here. And then I write the days. I draw like bubble letters, like you used to do in high school, draw on of your 3-ring binder in bubble.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference because you write that appointment. Like when I wrote it down, it's like I know in my mind, and because I wrote it down, I can see it. It's like 10 for the big stuff, like
Yeah.
a date or anything. And then like, writing stuff out is huge. That is great. And going analog versus digital.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And I know it's, maybe this because I'm an old man now, but
we are. That's why I say it. I never thought I looked that old, but people are like, no, you do.
yeah, it's like, yeah, you need to put a filter on your camera.
Yeah.
So like you said, that's kind of where I'm at with technology. I like to kind of take a step back at times.
That is awesome. And I'm actually the one I'm using for my calendar right now. It's full, but I have these things like over the years. This one's older, but it's just full of sketches and like mishmash and everything
Yeah,
else.
no, I've got one of those as well. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
And it's just like you just bled all over the page. Hiddleson, like, what is it? But I like it. It's a great app, right? The pencil
yeah.
app.
Yeah, like you said, I do the same thing. I have a notebook and I write stuff down, and that's kind of to me it kind of cuts through. It's like I only write down the important stuff.
Right.
So,
That's the other thing. You have this for the week. Like this is what
yeah,
that's like some of the weeks you look and it's packed and there's little like I wrote a square and wrote something in there. Some of the weeks it's kind of more blank and it's just organized and
yeah,
everything goes. And that's what you can go back and look. You're like, well, what are the weeks where I did, 5 weeks of work in 1 week? Oh, it was that week, the one with the doodles. That's the other thing.
yeah,
Doodling is actually good for you. I read this thing one time, like managers will get mad if somebody's doodling, like even just doodling, not something about whatever they're talking about. They've done studies where if you're doodling during a meeting, you're actually getting more information. Like you can have better recall. They do
yeah.
tests, So anyways,
You're at least
Rob,
awake.
this has been awesome, man. You've been a great friend.
Yeah,
That's the thing about the Dow Pizza too, is like our professional life, our personal life, uh, the friendships I really love. And thank you for coming on the show. I know you're busy, you're running the company. Now you own a company, run a company, sold a company, you got family. But give Max and Sean and Annika and Joylyn huge hug from me. We'll see you in a month or so if we can do
yeah.
it. Thank
No,
you. Thank you for
same
joining
here.
us. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Tao of Pizza podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.